Greetings. I would like to tell you 13 things about the Songhai Empire. Sit back, and then we'll talk. First of all, it's possible to argue this is the continent's greatest empire. Ancient Egypt is back there saying, no, it's not. Just in terms of the time that it lasted, it's not. But certainly there are some other achievements that you might want to consider. So let's talk about those. Gao was a mighty capital of a mighty empire, but they also had other large cities like Djenné and Timbuktu, which we've talked about before. The Niger River really dominates that region, so it is a region that it is impossible to separate from its geography. Then, as you know, elsewhere, remember there's a lot of sort of misinformation about Islam because of a very awful minority within that faith, but the acceptance of Islam by the rulers of Ghana, Mali, and the Songhai around 1000 encourages trade between the empires and North Africa. The introduction of Islam also institutes more cosmopolitan social structures such as universities, world religions, and especially centralized state systems and military forces. Unfortunately for the Songhai, not quite centralized or prepared enough, but we'll talk about that later. So here's a map. The pink part is the Songhai. They are definitely an expansive empire. Here's a chart. Number 6. We're just moving through. Kingdom of Ghana, Kingdom of Mali, Kingdom of Songhai. You can see it's not a super long-lived empire. From 1375 to 1591 are our years for this. Let's talk everyday life, because I know you love that social history. So they have a rich artistic heritage, especially found in Djenné. Gao is basically in ruins. Timbuktu is still in existence, but Djenné still has evidence of these all-female workshops. They made naturalistic art, like the rest of the world at this time, but they also made abstract art, which is fascinating because it shows something about their mode of thinking. This is, remember, hundreds and hundreds of years before Picasso and Rodin and Modigliani and Monet, before the abstract European artists are able to sort of express themselves in that way. These women in workshops in Djenné are doing that. It's a fascinating thing because abstract art represents abstract thinking, and fascinating if you ask me. Everyday life. They have 2 and 3 story houses. Remember, this is built in the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th century. They have indoor plumbing. In medieval London at this time, you'd have to watch out from falling feces as people threw it from their bedpans, and you'd have to watch from above. But the Songhai have indoor plumbing. They also even had a way of getting rid of the smell associated with plumbing. They would use hot water and then rocks into their plumbing system. I don't recommend that today, but for them, they have some pretty modern things. They have a fairly elaborate government with positions like this: the governors, chief of the summit, superintendent of the empire, deputy in charge of floods, director of ports, chief of etiquette and protocol. That suggests a certain level of social development, don't you think? Chief of salaries, chief of punishments, chief of engineering and public works, police commissary. These are government positions that you would hear about in a modern bureaucratic political system. They have quite an elaborate economic system as well. They have banks, something like that approximates a stock exchange, which takes a certain level as well of abstraction if you're thinking about currency prices and stock prices. And there's one account from 951 where a visiting merchant watches another merchant write a check for 42,000 golden dinars. A check! So they have this modern commercial life. And then they fall. As you know, because we talked about this before, the Moroccans crossed that desert and arrived from Morocco. They caused the fall of the Songhai. And that great civilization, it had not adopted guns and gunpowder, and so they would not survive. Just to sort of give you the extent of that wealth that is taken away from them, one Spaniard, a Spaniard Moroccan man named Judar Pasha, in 1599 goes back to Morocco with 30 camel loads of gold as his payment for his services, in terms of what he did in leading raids and helping to destroy the Songhai. They are stripped of all of their wealth, their books are burned, their gold is stolen, Gao, Djenné, Timbuktu, they are torn asunder. And so countless small kingdoms now reassert their freedoms. There's a vacuum of power from the fall of the Songhai, which happens all the time. And in yet another great example of a contradiction, the peace of empire gives way to the chaos and danger of individual small democracies. Doesn't that feel disconcerting? Like that empire seems to be more stable than democracy? Well, in this case, it also means any hope of unified resistance against European colonialism is lost. So the fall of the Songhai, you can link it in every way to the rise of the transatlantic slave trade. They're not going to have any way to have some sort of a unified resistance against the Europeans in that way. And of course, then the Africans themselves will participate in the slave trade. But if some kingdoms were going to stand up against that great evil, then it would have to have been large, unified, powerful places. With the fall of the Songhai in West Africa, that was over.